Hey guys, welcome back to the greenhouse. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about variegation and maximizing variegation in a couple different species. The guinea pig today is this lovely beast. I got this from a friend locally, so it wasn't shipped to me. These guys I have had shipped before, and it really just depends on how they're packaged. I've had them arrive and die immediately. I've had them arrive and just never skip a beat. I think it really depends on how they're packaged. What I've noticed is that there's a good amount of variegation in the middle, right here, but these longer strands look to be pretty reverted to me. I'm gonna unpot the whole thing. I'm gonna check the roots. I'm gonna clean up the leaves, and I'm gonna decide what size pot I need to pot this guy up into. So I'm just gonna start with the one that looks like it's reverted. Just gonna kind of unravel him and see if it is in fact a separate plant, or if it's connected to our main guy. The soil is a little moist, so it's not just gonna, uproot really easily. So I am going to gather all of the stems like this, and I'm just gonna pull the soil away, away from the edge of the pot, just to give it a little bit of an easier time coming out. Yeah, oh, girl, look at this girl. What is she doing? Oh my Lord. I've got a super healthy, happy root system. It just needs to be repotted. Thank you, David. I am going to remove this there's a plastic sheet in here. Folks put these in pots, particularly self-watering pots, just to give it some extra drainage at the bottom so that it's not like mucky, right? You don't want like a stagnant pile of water in the bottom, so that's what these are for. How do I want to go about this? I'm just going to manipulate the roots a little bit so that the soil starts to fall away and it's falling into the old pot, not just into my lap, because I do want to give her some fresh soil. I don't want to pull at anything. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and keep doing this until I get the majority of the soil off. So it's at a point now where the roots are pretty loose. I'm not going to rinse the roots because there are beneficial bacteria that grow in your soil that are, they live in symbiosis with your plant. So if you have a well-established plant like this, it's good to keep some of that soil hanging onto the roots. So now that the roots are a little looser, I can tell that these were placed in here as different plants. So I am just going to remove them one by one. Okay. Look, it's so beautiful. Oh my goodness, look at that. What? That's amazing. I do want to separate them completely because I want to arrange them really nicely in a new pot, but it's not necessary. You are increasing the risk that your plant might have some shock, transplant shock, might have some leaf die off. Okay, so look at this. Wowzers, that is amazing. So since I'm using the old pot to collect my old soil, I'm going to use this pot to keep my freshly unpotted cuttings in. And I will just pour a little water in there. Just pouring a little bit of water in there to keep them hydrated. This guy came out pretty easily. Nice, gorgeous, gorgeous leaves. Wow, I love that. This is one of my favorite plants. I think as far as variegation goes, it's one of the most rewarding variegated plants to keep. The reason is they grow really fast. There are some plants that are variegated that are stable, which means if they seem to have reverted, they will come back. There is debate about Pink Princess and whether or not they are stable. Lots of folks will argue that Pink Princess is stable because they buy the reverted, and so many people just get like a gorgeous half moon leaf out of nowhere. So it doesn't always have to have stem variegation for your Burgundy Princess to put out some pink. Another section with gorgeous roots. Okay, another one. So other kinds of variegation. There is unstable variegation, like you see with the Monstera albo. They are capable of reversion. They are capable of going all green. That doesn't mean you can't get it back. You can cut the plant back to where there was variegation, and it may from there produce more variegation. I have done that before with Syngonium, where there is variegation near the roots, and then it becomes more green at the end. You just cut the green off, give it more light, and your new growth should produce more variegation for you. This one might be my favorite so far. There's lots of variation in the variegation on these leaves, and I love the half moon. The other thing that you don't want to have happen with anything that's variegated is you don't want fully white leaves. I'll show you why. I recently removed one from this one. So this is one of my Syngoniums, and it keeps putting out these gorgeous half moon leaves that are solid on both sides. Obsessed with this. I did cut off the white right here because I put it too close to my radiator and it got crispy and ugly. So I cut off the white. The green is still doing something for this plant, so I don't want to get rid of it. I left the rest of that. But if you'll notice, this side of the stem is totally white. So anytime you have a stem that's split down the middle, it's going to produce leaves with variegation depending on which way the leaves emerge. So I'm lucky in that in this stem, I keep getting growth that comes out the side of the stem where the front is white and the back is green. So the side of the stem is going to produce half and half. Okay, it's like a mirror of what's happening on the stem. But if I were to get, and I have before I just removed it, if I were to get a leaf come out on the front of the stem, the white side, then it's going to be an all white leaf. When I had that happen, it survived for a surprisingly long amount of time. So it was all white like this. The only reason I cut it off was because this plant went a little underwatered for a little while, and that was the first leaf to go. So they use more energy than they produce for the plant because they don't have a lot of chlorophyll. People will say there's no chlorophyll in these leaves. It's terrible. Okay, if you look at it, especially if I were to take like a white piece of paper, you'll notice it is slightly green. There is some chlorophyll in this leaf, which means it is capable of photosynthesizing to a degree. But all white leaves are moochers. They're hanging out, taking a lot more than they do produce. Or it definitely will slow the growth of your plant. It will have a higher need for humidity because those white leaves, any effects of low humidity show up really easily on the white leaves. So anytime you underwater or it's just getting too dry, the white leaves are going to be the first to go. And so that's a bummer, but it is what it is. All right, last two sections of this guy. Every section has just been perfect though. This one's kind of interesting because I don't see any white on the stem. However, we have green leaves, fully green leaves by the roots. And then, oh, look at that, some white. Oh, look at that, some more white. And then on the ends, we're back to green. So that's super interesting. It could have been a stem that was under other stems. So these shaded leaves are gonna, or the shaded areas are gonna produce darker leaves or leaves with more green. So as far as like light needs in general, plants with higher variegation, that means more white, will need more light. They are not capable of absorbing as much light as a fully green leaf can absorb. Okay, that's the mass of the roots that I lost and all the soil. I will dump that soil into my garden. There is nothing wrong with it. It looks like super healthy soil. All right, rolled up my sleeves, ready to dig into my bucket of dirt. And here is what we're working with. All of this gorgeous Syngonium vine and beautiful, beautiful roots. There's no soil in here. This is all roots. I love these little projects of just, you know, plants that just need a little bit of help. And I know that once this plant is where it wants to be and receiving what it needs, that it's gonna do really, really well. And I'll have to give David a cutting. This is the arrowhead vine, just the green one that I have in my house. I just have it in this lovely little pot I got in a swap. These plants can get kind of leggy, and so I want to add to this pot, but I don't think that this current pot is the size that it should be if I'm going to add any of these with major root systems. And there we go. The green variety, the non-variegated ones, can actually withstand drying out quite a lot. You'll notice they won't grow much for you, and they'll start to droop because they're thirsty, but still a perfectly healthy plant. I go probably 3 weeks occasionally in between watering this plant, and it's still happy, and this is a brand new leaf. If you want to fill out a pot of something that you have that's variegated and you don't want to spend a fortune to buy a bunch more of those, just get the green form and mix it in. There's nothing wrong with that, and it looks quite nice actually because you get some contrast. I have separated all of the vines from the plant that are fully green, and you can tell the ones that have been, they look to be sun bleached a little bit. They may have been overwatered at some point or something, but I think this is more like sun bleaching. These are the ones that were inside my house, so dark green. These are the ones that have been exposed to the outdoors or maybe a grow light, little lighter. The reason for that is the darker the leaf, the more sun that it can absorb. The darker the color of the leaf, the more sun it can absorb. So these were grown, this one was grown in a darker environment. So in order to survive, this plant started putting out some darker leaves to absorb that sun and photosynthesize efficiently. So I had a friend bring me, it was 3 separate Monstera plants in 2 pots, and I am rehabbing them for her. Actually, they're right behind me. They're doing really well. The roots are making roots, so they'll be ready shortly, but until they are, I think I'm gonna use her pot. Sorry, thank you. It's the only one I can find that isn't hideous, that will house the roots that I'm looking at. When you're selecting a pot, there's a whole video on this. It's the last one that I put out. But when you are selecting a pot, you want to look for your roots to fill something like 80% or so of the area inside the pot. So that's, I think, pretty solid. I might be at about 75, but these roots are long, so when I spread them out in the pot, I think they're gonna be happy. I don't want my roots to sit in water. Syngonium like water, and they will actually grow semi-aquatic, so it wouldn't be the end of the world if I had them kind of hanging out in the saucer, but I don't want to go that far because I want to give them room to grow. So what I'm gonna do is put some soil at the bottom of my pot first so that the roots are not just gonna fall straight through into the saucer. This pot has 2 drainage holes that are about that size. If I don't have any mesh or window screen or anything around, I like to put just a little bit of sphagnum at the bottom. That's gonna be fine for a plant like this because sphagnum will retain a little bit of moisture, but Syngonium like that, so not a problem. But what it's gonna do for me is create a little buffer between the soil and the water so that the soil doesn't just fall out of the bottom of the pot. So right over the drainage hole, I'm just gonna put a little buffer of sphagnum. So I'm not just going to let it go and then start dumping my soil because I'll end up burying the stems too far. So I like to gather them so that the root collar, the base of the plant, are all about at the same spot right here where I'm holding my hand, so the soil can go up to my thumb here. So I'm just going to hold the base of the plant at the top of the pot. It's just suspended over the pot. While it's being held like that, I can pour in my soil. And I will kind of tug it up a little bit because when I water, it will settle some. When I'm pouring in my soil, I like to do that just around the edges first. And you'll find that it will make it look like all your roots are stuck together right here. So as you fill up about halfway, you want to just tease them apart a little bit because we don't want our roots to just sit in a column in the middle of the pot. When you get to the top, so halfway through, we kind of manipulated the roots so that they were spread out. Now when I get to the top and I let go of my stems, I'm going to manipulate them a little bit so that they're a little spread out. I don't want everything bunched up in the middle. So I'm just going to kind of move them over and get this plant looking like I want it to look. Pouring in the last of my dirt. Since I am going to have this in a place where only looking at one side of the pot. I want all of that plant to kind of spill over toward or over that edge. So that's how I've arranged it in the pot. It's kind of all spilling over one edge. There she is. Beautiful. Yeah, this guy turned out good. I'm really happy with this. So this one will go back inside. To my lovely friend watching, whose pot I'm using, guess what? I'm gonna use your other pot too. Here's what we've got from the pot that I picked up today. And what I'm going to do is combine it with one that I already have. They will produce larger leaves for you if you let them attach their aerial roots to a stake. And the way I tend to do that is by using these little Velcro strips. They're actually Velcro brand. You can find them on Amazon, but they're not always in stock. So check your local nursery too. The cedar stake stained this one, so it is what it is, but it sticks to itself. You can reuse it. Generally, you know, plants have green vines, so they look even better on, you know, thick stemmed like monsteras and things like that. But yeah, love these. They're pretty strong. So they're great for temporary support while your plant is establishing itself on a stake. This guy is putting on an aerial root right here, and if I had oriented it correctly on the stake, this one may have been attaching itself to the stake already. But I didn't really pay attention, did I? This one is in mostly sphagnum because it's been in my greenhouse and I keep my greenhouse pretty hot. So the sphagnum is okay in this environment because it's drying out pretty quickly. So I just use my finger. If you're somebody that is like, has a phobia of like the dirt under fingernails, this is not the channel for you, I'm sorry. I'm a teacher, I'm a mother, and I'm just not a patient person. I think that potting them together will give some really nice contrast, so it should be pretty cool. I want to make sure that all of the cuttings that I'm potting in the same pot have mature enough roots to reach where the water is going to go, so to access the depth of this pot. One thing I'm noticing is it does not really have a lifted area in the middle, like right here, and I do like for it to, because as much as these like water, I don't want them sitting in wet soil. I'm gonna add an upside down nursery pot to the middle of this pot, and there he is. So just fit him in the middle like that, okay? And I'm gonna plant around it and put my soil around it. That's gonna keep the water, it's gonna make the water easier to drain into my removable saucer. If you didn't know, these do come off, they pop off, so that if you overwater it, you can just drain that and then put it back. You don't want your roots growing into your saucer. Back on. All right. So again, my nursery pot, I have just set in the middle of my pot here. Okay, I'm not concerned about how much room that's taking up because this pot is just a tad big for what I'm using it for. So perfect. And if you have a pot that's too big and you just have to use it, that's a really great way to, you know, lessen the space inside the pot so that it's usable for what you need at the moment. I like to pour in just a little soil at the bottom to start. And as I go, of course, I'm going to spread out my roots a little bit so that they're not just in one clump in the pot. This one is going to be in the greenhouse where it's warmer and that water is going to evaporate really quickly. So I need for my soil mix to retain a little bit more water than I would if I were putting this inside. So that's why when I potted up the fully green Syngonium, I used a lot of orchid bark in that mix. I don't know if you could tell when I was potting it, but it had quite a bit of orchid bark in it because I need it to be well draining. That water is not going to evaporate very well in my home. So it's not all about heat, of course. Your plant, if it's receiving more light, is going to photosynthesize more, which means it's going to need more water. Alternatively, if your plant is receiving less light, you don't want to overwater, or you don't want to give it as much water because it's not going to use it. And when you have soil that is waterlogged, you end up with bacteria that causes root rot. There we go. Dun, 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 dun. that is gorgeous. All right, super happy with that. It's in a really bright spot and right by the humidifier, so none of the white on the leaves should get crispy on me. And I think it looks great. And here we have the one that is staying inside. As always, if you have any questions, leave them below and I will respond to each and every one. Otherwise, I'll see you on Thursday. Bye, guys.